What is up everyone, I'm CB Productions, and welcome to my review of yet another Marvel Disney Plus series, taking a darker look at this universe through the lens of a broken man, or men, as they try to navigate this world, fighting over not only themselves, but also far more sinister forces that threaten the world as we know it, Moon Knight. This series, ever since it's been announced, has interested many, including myself. Considering how dark the source material is for this character, for this show to be on Disney Plus, many people were skeptical and curious as to how far Disney would let this series go as in terms of being dark, and following the tone of the character and the style of the comic book series they've been a part of. Or would it keep it safe within the Marvel borders as we know for the past 14 years? Which has been quite the question over several of these darker characters that are slated to get reboots or introductions in the MCU coming up soon, like Blade, Deadpool, Werewolf by Night, etc. But people's interest in the show did spark up even more after the announcement of Oscar Isaac taking up the mantle of Moon Knight, being the third time in his career that this actor has picked up the Marvel role, after playing Apocalypse in X-Men Apocalypse, voicing Spider-Man 2099 in the post-credit scene of Into the Spider-Verse, and now with this character. This interested many for why he would actually be picking up this role, especially since I would say this actor's big enough to where he could do whatever he wants. And why would he pick up with a studio that already screwed him previously with Star Wars? And this show definitely piqued my interest even more once Ethan Hawke was announced to play the main villain, which this would be his first foray into the comic book genre. The show definitely gained a lot of hype over the coming months, and now since all 6 episodes of the series have wrapped and been released, it's now time to see if Moon Knight does stack up against the other Marvel Disney Plus projects, and see if it is the first Marvel show to really utilize its potential, or if it's just another Marvel show that bites up more than it can chew, which we've seen quite a bit of lately. Well, let's get into this series and find out. The first thing I'll get off my chest regarding the series is the fact that I did dug the darker tone that the show went for. It's not a complete 180 from the rest of the MCU, but you can definitely tell the series isn't in the same boat as the Ant-Man movies or Hawkeye. This show does have quite a bit of substantial drama to it that bleeds through these 6 episodes in an effective way that makes our characters' circumstances way more believable. Because it's not just another story about some guy trying to take over the world and our hero having to stop it, even though there are parts in the series that are like that. It's also about our main characters fighting over themselves and their inner turmoil, especially with our lead characters in both Mark Spector and Stephen Grant, as both throughout the entire series are at the opposite ends of every single argument they're a part of, as they both have to learn to live with themselves in the same body and accept themselves for who they really are, especially when we get revealed how Stephen was created through the death of his younger brother and his mom abusing him, by far being the most uncomfortable and demented stuff we've seen in the MCU thus far, that as an adult genuinely made me feel unsafe and uncomfortable in a way that the showrunners intended you to feel, actually making the show more mature that does stand out and make our main characters way more investing as a result. Oscar Isaac sells both of our lead characters in so many unique ways, as his dynamic between himself and, well, himself is extremely believable and a great challenge for an actor that doesn't have the capability to have an on-screen person to bounce these lines off with. And he does it so well in a way to where it's actually more dynamic between himself, more than most buddy cop movies we've seen in the past 5 years or so. They both have their own quirks, their own arcs, their own dialect, their own fighting style, to where both personalities are interesting and each get the equal amount of screen time. And they're also interesting on their own, but they're even stronger together. And even though we don't get much of him in the series, Oscar Isaac does do a good job as Jake Lockley, the more violent third personality that is hidden for most of the runtime until the end credits stinger in the finale. But whatever project Moon Knight shows up next, I am excited to see more of him be explored, hopefully. Despite I still think James McAvoy owns the subgenre of DID super beings with playing the Beast in Split and Glass, Oscar Isaac does do a good job standing on his own, which is kind of funny how both of them fought against each other in X-Men Apocalypse, but that's a tangent. Ethan Hawke's our main villain in Arthur Harrow, despite the character himself not being as fantastic as I wanted him to be, given the fact that Ethan Hawke playing this character, Ethan Hawke still gives his A game here. Especially in the first few episodes as a mysterious leader of this cult that has the power to kill people by judging their actions to see if they are a good person or not, and discover what his ultimate plan is with wanting to judge everyone on this planet simultaneously and taking out anyone that's not worthy of the gods to him. Very much giving me Project Insight vibes from Captain America Winter Soldier. He still was a character that I was really invested in, both when we see him in the real world as a subdued villain, and even when he's a psychiatrist during these board sessions whenever Mark's stuck in this mental hospital when he's in the purgatory stage of his life. He's an A-class actor and this role is no exception to him. I also really enjoy Layla as well, Mark's wife that's lost him for many years and finally finds him whenever he's Steven, as all 3 of them have to go to Egypt to stop Harrow. At first she just kind of seemed like the bland love interest that was just kind of there just to be one note and just be a vessel to dump all the exposition on Mark and why we should care about him and all of his past and stuff. But she's a good character on her own merit, and I was really invested in her story, especially when it's revealed that Mark was involved in her father's death. That's also the same night that he was granted the powers of the Moon Knight, and I was actually satisfied seeing her suit up in the finale and actually fight alongside Moon Knight. Due to the fact that she also does have to wrestle with their own demons and learn to accept Mark and Steven for who they actually are. Not to mention May Kalamami's performance also sells the character on top of that. And of course we can't talk about the show without mentioning F. Mary Abraham's voice as Khonshu, the moon god that grants Mark and Steven with the powers of the Moon Knight as his avatar to control throughout these 6 episodes. This character is really interesting in my opinion just due to the fact that you don't really know what side he's actually on throughout the entire series' runtime. You don't know if he's for Mark or Steven or he's just there just to use him for a body. And not knowing what tricks he has up his sleeve. And we find out he has quite a lot. Sure, there are some redeemable things that this character does, like turning the stars back in the 3rd episode, but you never feel safe whenever Mark and Steven are in the same vicinity as him. And that's all due to the foreboding atmosphere that F. Mary Abraham gives this character in his voice alone, along with the motion capture work as well. Not to mention the writing as well being strong for this character, that does make me want to see this character more in future MCU installments. The rest of the characters from Tarawet, who help Steven and Mark on their acceptance journey in the afterlife and eventually getting back them to reality. Up there goes gravity. I'm sorry, I can't help myself. But she has a fun presence in these last 2 episodes, along with all the other characters that Mark, Steven, and Layla come across, are also entertaining and stand out as well. Everyone serves their roles in the show very well in my opinion. The action is also pretty solid here as well. Getting a lot of good choreography planned out as you can definitely tell on screen. And when you have a show where your main character is constantly changing fighting styles based on the personality that the character is overtaking, the team behind the show did a very good job at flowing between Mark and Steven's fighting styles very well. And did it in a way to where it didn't stop the action in its tracks. And the fact that the action is a lot more bloody, grounded, and a lot less fantastical, minus some kaiju fighting going on in the finale, it shows at least to me that Marvel's making a branch for more mature shows hopefully in the future in my opinion. Not to mention the costume design in the show is impeccable. Each costume stands out in a great way, and it shows to me that these Marvel series are getting the same amount of budget and treatment as the big budget movies. I also do really enjoy the aesthetic changes in the show. The fact that most of the series is either set in London or Egypt or somewhere in Europe, that has been barely touched on in the MCU beforehand, especially in Egypt. Really getting a break from all the American city aesthetic that we've gotten from the MCU since the beginning, and getting to explore a culture that most of the general audience watching this show most likely don't know about beforehand in Egypt, including yours truly, is actually really cool in my opinion. And it's also one of the easiest ways to refresh an MCU installment by making it set in a new location we haven't been to before. The score also by Hisham Nazi, sorry if I mispronounced the name, I probably heard mispronounced 3 names in this video already, also adds to the atmosphere of the show's location and the tension building throughout these 6 episodes with their characters and their situations, and having a really catchy end credit song on top of that. And honestly to me, I think this might be the best music out of any of the Marvel Disney Plus shows thus far. I found the story to be quite intriguing. I really did like feeling the confusion that our characters were going in through, especially in the first couple episodes when we were just diving in and out of Steven's personality and finding out there's more going on underneath the surface, and then that leads to Mark and then eventually leads to Jake Lockley, consistently being in the shoes of our main characters as they learn how to accept themselves as well as rediscover themselves as they have to fight to get their body back and their soul back. And I found it quite entertaining to see. Marvel's always done a good job of making their characters their first priority in this universe. And Moon Knight is yet another character I do want to see more in this universe going down the road. All the technical aspects are top notch as always for Marvel. The practical and visual effects are really good. The production design is stellar. The cinematography is very stunning, really showing the beauty of Egypt in my opinion. The directing is pretty good from all 3 directors that took over these 6 episodes, giving a very unique visual style to the show. Along with the fact that this is probably the first dark MCU show in my opinion that isn't some of the what if animated stuff we've seen earlier. And lastly, I do want to say I actually did quite enjoy the writing here. Now, is it perfect? No. But I did find this character study wrapped in this globetrotting adventure made this series quite a ride to watch throughout the weeks it was airing. There wasn't one episode where I was bored or uninterested or felt like the show was dragging. I was always invested in something in the series, whether Harrow's plan would succeed and what was his true plan, his motivation for why he was doing all this stuff to awaken this god that was going to take all the souls of all the innocents. How Mark was involved with Layla's father's death and how he got the Moon Knight powers in the first place. Or if Khonshu's really on Mark and Steven's side, or are they just using him for the body? What was going on with his 3rd personality? And are the events that unfold in the series just a dream from a whacked out patient in a mental ward? Not to mention this show is very accessible in my opinion, due to the fact that it's not really tethered to the rest of the MCU storyline for now. And also given the fact that this is the first MCU Disney Plus show to really focus on an entirely new character, versus just being a spin-off show from a character we've already seen in the movies like every other MCU show that's come out last year. But I'm glad this is an installment of the MCU to where you don't really need required viewing of every single movie and every single series that came beforehand. And honestly, if this was slightly more violent and mature, this could be placed alongside the Netflix series like Jessica Jones and Daredevil, and they would blend in perfectly. Which does excite me for refreshing the MCU in an era where most people are on the downslope of interest for the series, especially after Endgame and No Way Home. Overall, it's a very enjoyable series and I walked away from it quite satisfied. Now, despite this series does improve upon a lot of the mistakes that the previous Marvel shows have fallen into, there are still a couple major issues that do have this series that does keep it from reaching its potential. And pretty much all of them are kind of intertwined with one another. This mainly has to do with the pacing of the series as well as the finale. Now, starting off with the pacing, this show does take a slow burn approach to this story, making you slowly peel back the layers of our main characters and find out why are they in the situation of this world-ending stakes, and how did they become two personalities in the same body at the same time. This show does a great job explaining our main characters in Steven and Mark simultaneously, as well as explaining Layla's place in the story as well as Arthur Harrow, building these plot threads that make you want to keep watching the series, wanting you to see the conclusion to this narrative. But once you get to the end, in my opinion, it all feels quite rushed and just kind of feels like everything just kind of got thrown at the wall. And it's just kind of disappointing that the fact that, once again, the build-up that the previous 5 episodes have built upon this entire series just kind of gets washed away in expense for essentially just a big giant finale, where everything just kind of just gets thrown at you in an extremely fast pace, in an extremely quick succession, to where it's just mostly action at that point and just a character getting a new suit, which we've seen from basically every single Marvel series finale at this point. These plot beats go by a mile at a minute, and some of the stuff they build up they don't even follow through with, like with Jake Lockley. The fact that he essentially uses third personality as just a card to beat Harrow off screen was just such a bitch move in my opinion. I don't know if it was just a budget thing or just Ethan Hawke didn't want to do his own stunts. I don't really know what happened, but you can tell that something was missing there. Not to mention they essentially just used Jake Lockley as a cliffhanger for whatever's next for Moon Knight. I mean, we're not getting a season 2 apparently because it got listed for the Emmys as a miniseries. So are they just going to pick this up in the Midnight Suns movie or something like that? I don't really know. We don't really know what's going to happen next to this character. And so that's why this post-credit scene makes, I don't know, not a whole lot of sense to me personally. I don't know, it's just kind of disappointing to me that out of all the Disney Plus Marvel stuff that's come out in the past year or so, not one of these 6 shows have actually been able to end off on a high note in my opinion. The closest being Loki. And I think that's primarily due to 2 major things. Firstly, it's clear to me the fact that the higher-ups on Marvel don't know the fact that movies and TV do not work the same as in terms of, structuring, pacing, and payoff. The final episode of a season or a series is not the equivalent to a third act of a movie. And it's shown that in all of these series thus far, what's essentially the equivalent to a first and second act of a movie is essentially stretched over all these episodes minus the final episode, leaving the final episode the entirety of the third act, to where these series finales really do go by at a clip pace, to where everything goes by so fast in such quick succession, to where the viewer doesn't really get to sink his teeth into the events that are unfolding on screen. And before you know it, it's over. Versus something like Better Call Saul, for example, that's also running on TV concurrently to this series going on. The reason I bring up Better Call Saul is because that show really does take a slow burn approach to its events going on, being able to keep you in suspense of what's currently going on, but having payoffs that feel consistent with the pace that the show's going for, and making the payoffs effective in the way to where it makes the show better in retrospect looking back. None of these Marvel shows have that in my opinion. And not to mention that secondly, all of these Marvel projects are being made at such a fast clip now, to where so many projects like movies and TV shows and short films are all made simultaneously, all in the same time frame, to where it's increased from like 2 to 3 films a year to now like 4 to 5 films a year now, and like 5 and 6 TV shows and whatever's coming down the pipeline. That the feedback to make these shows necessarily better in my opinion are not going to be carried over to the next MCU series like Ms. Marvel or She-Hulk, whatever comes next, because those shows are already made in the can by the time the series is already premiered. To the point where Kevin Feige and his crew can't fundamentally change up the shows when they're shooting them to change up the formula and make these shows better in my opinion. Because there's so many turning wheels and so many like arcs and stuff being built simultaneously that not one Marvel project is a priority. Minus the bigger picture and the next big Avengers crossover that's going to be here like the next 7 or 8 years. And it's just a little frustrating because you can tell that the writers of these Marvel shows are running into the exact same issues because they're not really getting their necessary feedback to make these shows better. It's like the definition of insanity, just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that's primarily, at least to me, why we haven't gotten one universally loved Marvel show just yet. And I also think an issue with the pacing being so rushed and everything is that the fact that the series is only 6 episodes. Series like these that have so many plot threads going on should be at least 10 to 12 episodes, or at least 8. Making sure we get to fully understand every single character's arc, like Harrow's plan and like his role with Khonshu and his entire past and stuff, which I kind of gets scraped over in the final product. And to me, who was really interested in seeing Ethan Hawke take on this role, I wanted to see why he walked on broken glass every single day, and why he does all these weird things, why he has these weird tattoos on his arms and stuff that can kill people in an instant. And the fact that apart from the first couple episodes, we really don't get much from him, and the fact he just gets unceremoniously killed off in the post-credit scene, makes me wonder why an actor like Ethan Hawke, who has the talent and has the charisma and has the power to do whatever he wants, chose this role minus maybe Marvel backing up the money trunk substantially for his role. And especially if we got more episodes, you get more time to explain Jake Lockley, because we're not getting a season 2, why don't you just explore his character fully and really get to see his violent actions? Because the only reason why we didn't get to see his full violent actions throughout this entire series, I guess it's just because they didn't want to go too far, and it's kind of like the litmus test of like what Marvel can do without offending parents and stuff, I guess. I don't know. I just feel like it was a missed opportunity not exploring Jake Lockley. That I think would have been better versus this weird cliffhanger that I don't even know what's setting up. Unless they're going to do the Sam Wilson treatment and just give him a standalone movie in the future. I still did enjoy his show for all it's worth, but I do feel it kind of ran into the same issues that ran into all these Marvel shows previously. Overall, Moon Knight is a very entertaining show that I did enjoy watching it throughout a 6-episode run. Getting to explore its dark characters and the more mature side of the MCU that I hope gets expanded upon throughout Phase 4 in the future. The acting is great, especially from our titular hero and villain. The action's top notch. I love the change in locations for this universe. Having some very sharp writing, very good character development from our heroes, making you follow a very interesting journey as unique to any other MCU journey previously. Having all the great technical aspects you expect for a show on this scale, and making me want to see his character again in the future. But it still hurt from an underwhelming finale that tries to rush through its plot points so deliberately that it does kind of undermine the 5 episodes prior. Not pacing out a story super well, having an underdeveloped villain, setting up stuff for the future that I don't know how to take in, and a few other minor things I do kind of have an issue with, but I still did have a blast of the series overall. I still do think it's a very entertaining installment in the MCU, but it's just this close to really reaching its potential in my opinion. We may get that in the future with a movie or season 2, whatever comes out with this character in the future. I'm still pumped to see where Moon Knight ends up next, and I'm especially excited to see where these darker characters end up in the MCU, especially after seeing this and Doctor Strange 2 back to back, where weaknesses of very darker and bloodier heroes really take on the big screen, which in my opinion does make me ecstatic. But as for this show, I will give Moon Knight a B+, an 8.5 out of 10, and a rent it recommendation. So that's Moon Knight. What do you guys think about it? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, and please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. I'm CB Aaron Productions, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.